Issue 2, Sonic Boom Comic. We start out with another unnecessary fourth wall breaking joke because Sonic tells Eggman his mecha might hit the credits, which he shouldn't be aware of. Sonic really doesn't fit this role, at least not Boom Sonic anyways. Early Archie Sonic did, because he was much more clearly the main character. Here, it feels like more of the heroes are all equally important. Six should be the only one breaking the fourth wall. And even then I don't like it. Fourth wall breaking is worthless. I haven't complained so much about stupid meta jokes since early Archie Sonic, and Archie learned their lesson from that for a reason, and they're going back on it. Anyways, suddenly Amy gets all melodramatic because she can't find her hammer. So I guess this Amy doesn't summon it from hammer space then. Wait, what the fuck? Now all of a sudden she does have her hammer, when such a big deal was made about it earlier, and I thought that would be the plot. That was stupid. Was that just there for the sake of a really lame joke when there's way too much text from the blabbermouth writer? This isn't a good first impression. Like Knuckles was about to make a deal with Eggman last issue. Why aren't we starting the story out there? That's common sense. Instead, we start out right in the middle of the action with Amy telling Tails to keep the mecha off balance, while she'll go for the knees. And she tells Six to never mind, she gives up immediately because she sees her fighting the mecha uselessly. Can't she just be competent? After a pointless name logo joke, and Sonic mentioning it's the same exact mecha from last issue, seriously, these jokes are so lame. Eggman looks pathetic before saying mecha is a new secret weapon. For no reason, Styx assumes the weapon is secret sauce just because of the secret part, which is forced, although all of the jokey dialogue has been forced and stilted so far. It's really not better than the earliest of Archie Sonic at this point. And I like that better! Anyways, I'm sure Eggman could make dangerous secret sauce, like poisonous stuff, but her assuming this so easily is dumb. Speaking of dumb, Knuckles shows up and sends Sonic flying away. Why Sonic, not Amy? The one he's actually angry at. And you know, with his top-heavy build reminding me of Thrash, Boom Knuckles really looks a lot better suited for the role as villain. He really does look like he'd be a bad guy's muscle. He fits well in this role. Sonic thinks this was just his idea of a joke for no reason, so clearly this is the first time Knuckles ever betrayed him. Seriously, he should be attacking Amy, not just Sonic, who hasn't been shown to insult him once. Which is backwards because normally Sonic is supposed to be the one insulting Knuckles, not Amy. Sonic Boom's idea of originality seems to just be getting the main characters and their dynamics completely wrong, while the actual plot of last issue could be from any Sonic comic. And I don't know if I'm okay with that yet. Oh, but they're on an island with a village of Mobians. Because it's an island. That makes it so different from Knothole, apparently. It's obvious that Sonic will get interrupted in the next panel because he was cut off in this one. I wonder if Knuckles will smack him with the metal box he's holding. He punches him and then puts him in a cage, and says that he's joining Eggman without any immediate explanation for it for some reason. Tails tries and fails to punch him in the air, as Knuckles looks briefly intimidated of him. Knuckles looks intimidated by Tails. The muscular Knuckles, mind you. He's a cowardly lion, apparently, which is at least a nice twist on the muscular guy, but it's just not him. Tails naturally calls him out, and actually develops on their unique dynamic and friendship by saying that he was the one who taught Knuckles how to ride a bike, and wrap his pointless sports tape and count. I'm expected to believe he didn't know how to count until yesterday. I could buy this from Styx, but not from a Knuckles so far removed from the actual Knuckles that I can't really assume he's got the same isolated childhood. Wouldn't they all have gone to school? They'd have no reason not to have gone to school and be in school, considering that this Eggman isn't a dictator. Am I expected to believe that he taught him all of this in one day, though? He says yesterday. Then that wouldn't be implying that he does this kind of thing for him all the time. I do like the idea that Tails teaches Knuckles stuff, and successfully. We never get any development on their friendship normally. Tails gets trapped in a cage because he was busy talking to him, and he fortunately lampshades that he wasn't paying attention. And Styx puts herself in a cage on purpose, which is stupid of her obviously, but at least the thin justification for it is that she's got a rebellious streak, so she wants to do the exact opposite of what's expected, just to be contrary. What, so she's a hipster? Styx better do something useful at some point, because so far she's the Chip of this comic. She's way better than Chip, but she's still nothing but a comedy relief character who seems to only exist to waste our time. Where'd she even get that cage? How'd she know to bring it here? Amy asks Knuckles what he was thinking, and Knuckles says satisfyingly, "Oh, I can think now?" Knuckles satisfyingly tells her off for insulting him at every opportunity, but sadly it's not as good as it could be because Flynn forces him to say thought for himself purely to make Amy correct him again. This is so lazy. There's so much forced comedy so far. This is Pontac and Graph level humor. I read stories so I can be immersed in them, not get taken out of it and distracted every 5 seconds. Knuckles yells at her for her usual behavior while Amy looks scared, being intimidated of Knuckles and taken down a peg. Oh, never mind. All of a sudden she goes from that to calm and composed right away. That's satisfying, right? Amy says that she knows she gets impatient with him sometimes, and she apologizes for saying some hurtful things, and says that it's no excuse for his behavior. Sonic says his toes have gone numb, as Amy nags Knuckles some more, while not even bothering to explain why Knuckles made a mistake, which he clearly needs. Amy looks scared again, and the mecha puts a cage in his hand, and Amy gets put in a cage. I guess Amy thought that not siding with Eggman was self-explanatory because he's evil, and Knuckles has been with her for so long that she'd think he'd hate him too much to let him do anything evil. She should have said that with Eggman's main enemies out of the way, he'd be free to do evil stuff, and he alone wouldn't be able to stop his plans, especially not if multiple plans are going on at once. Eggman plans to conquer a village. I kind of like his steampunk design, by the way, because it still looks like he's a wannabe conqueror. It just seems like he doesn't look as intimidating, though that's possibly just a consequence of the fact that he isn't as intimidating. And Eggman actually considers destroying the village instead, purely because he took out pork chops of Thaw for dinner. Well, I guess destroying it would let him steal materials from the village's ruins to build stuff. Never mind. Just he's normally about ruling. He decides he'll flip a coin when he gets there to decide, and we cut to later instead of seeing Knuckles' actual reaction to Eggman's plan, which he was clearly saying out loud the whole time. Selective hearing, apparently. Tails wonders if he could find a weak joint in the cage, somehow being confident that he'd be able to break out of it himself. Sonic's already extremely claustrophobic because he wants to move. It makes me immediately think of how he'd go insane from staying like this his whole life. I mean, this is torture for him. Amy tells Knuckles that now nobody's left to protect the island, and Knuckles says that his brilliant plan is that he's only pretending to work for Eggman. Amy says that he captured them, and therefore he is working for him. And Knuckles just looks horrified and hits his own head, calling himself stupid, instead of, pointing out that his plan is to be a double agent to Eggman and screw things up for him as a move behind the scenes, and he only captured them out of necessity to avoid blowing his cover. No, of course not. Let's just make him immediately regretful of what he did just because Amy said one thing. He falls on his knees uncharacteristically melodramatically and apologizes to them extremely easily because the story arc was extremely rushed. Good writing would have him continue to call Amy out on being a jerk, say that he's going to be a double agent against Eggman, which he'd naturally screw up then because an idiot can't be subtle, and only when he sees the villagers get terrorized beyond anything he can help them with would he realize that he screwed up because he would try to save them and fail. There'd only be one of him after all. Instead, Amy says condescendingly that this is why they talk through their problems, because that always works. Knuckles says that he's just too dumb to make things up to them, and he'd screw up that too. And surprisingly, I actually feel really bad for him, as he sits on the floor and sulks and actually starts to cry. And it's lampshaded that Amy's the one who got them into this mess. Okay, Knuckles acting like this is understandable, and it'd be alright with me if the real Knuckles cried on occasion, particularly about this. It'd be a brilliant reality ensues deconstruction of how Knuckles is treated like an idiot by all of his friends and eventually just can't take it anymore. It's weird that the more muscular Knuckles is the more emotional and sensitive one, though. That seems kind of backwards. I guess he thinks that because he has muscles, it's okay for him to wear his heart on his sleeve? Because forced comedy, Knuckles takes off leaving them in cages because for some reason none of his friends thought to tell him to let them out first. Is there any natural writing this so far? Styx is then a Chekhov's gun because she can escape her cage just fine because she brought her own, and the cage she happened to bring lets her get out of it at any time. So then why did she wait so long to try to get out of it instead of doing it right away? That was forced too. Styx lets Sonic out of the cage and he immediately spin dashes around talking about going fast like a hyperactive 2-year-old version of himself who's been flanderized to the nth degree to be about nothing other than going fast. Is this what the reboot mandates on Sonic not being overly emotional is doing to his character? I mean, this is probably what a Mario fanboy wanting to mock Sonic as a character might write him as. It's not like he drank a lot of coffee or is on a huge sugar rush. I get that he's just happy to be free, but it looks like he's a parody of himself in this scene. He's about more than just going fast and being utterly simple-minded. After Orbot breaks the fourth wall because Flynn thinks that characters mentioning logos is brilliant and not just characters dryly pointing out something happening, Knuckles throws Orbot and Cubot into the wall, punches a hole in the roof of the mecha, scratches its paint, and teases it like a bully telling it to stop hitting itself as he smacks it with its own arm. Boom Knuckles needs to do this kind of thing every issue. Literally every one. He's supposed to have super strength, isn't he? That's the only way he can make up for being the forced comedic dialogue character. It's not only awesome of him, but it's the only way to write him that makes sense because he has super strength, so just let him use it. Sonic spin dashes out of the mecha straight through its metal wall, and Tails flies while carrying the girls, and Knuckles says that he wanted to be the one to rescue everyone, and wishes Sonic didn't always have to be the hero. Sonic is too busy having fun running to care. You'd think that after all that time cramped up in a tiny cage, he would be way too sore and cramped to be able to run like this so soon. I hate that Sonic didn't really react to what Knuckles was doing. Like, Sonic tends to have a much stronger, more memorable dynamic with Knuckles than Amy does. Anyways, Tails has to clear his throat to get Amy to let go of his hand and make Knuckles get a chance to save her to feel better. Amy doesn't bother putting any effort into the acting though. She's such a bitch! I can understand her being annoyed with Knuckles because I am too, but that doesn't mean she comes off as a sympathetic character. Boom Amy's so overpraised. The only reason she's so praised is because she's not just a Sonic fangirl. But at least Fleetway Amy wasn't a total bitch. How can people hate Sally when this is the only alternative to her? She at least is drawn to look super regretful when she apologizes to Knuckles. Not that I care that she's doing it, because logically, realistically, I doubt she'd permanently change her behavior. I mean, we don't need the characters to point out that Knuckles has stupid dialogue, because we already know. We can read. Is this by Flynn or Pontac and Graf? Because he's certainly doing a good job imitating their style of humor. Knuckles says that plotting gives him a headache apparently when he barely did any because of more ridiculous forced humor. God, maybe I should make a count of these, but if I did that, the number would be obnoxious, so I wouldn't bother showing it on screen anyways. Orbot finally speaks up, telling the heroes that he's stuck here and his ride has fled into the ocean. In a setup that's probably going to lead to Knuckles just throwing the robots over the ocean because predictable writing. Every character except Amy has a different idea for how to get the robots home. Sonic says that Tails could fly him and Cubot home, or Sonic could run them over the water, and Styx says there's a secret portal under her couch that'll send them anywhere that begins with a Q. This is a magical fantasy universe, so it wouldn't be that crazy of a stretch if this was true. And it'd be cool if it was and it was used as a Chekhov's gun, so she wasn't that crazy after all. But if it wasn't, why would she ever say that? Why would she ever think a portal like that happened? I was definitely right to call her crazy then. And it's kind of awkward to have a character making fun of the mentally ill of the Sonic franchise. Like, they won't admit that Big the Cat's mentally challenged. They won't say that Cream the Rabbit's being really polite to overcompensate for having autism and thus not being perfect at social skills. Because all that would be too controversial, acknowledging that people like that exist in the first place. But then Styx shows up, and all they have to do is not say the name of her disorder, and apparently it's fine. I mean, at least so far anyways, we haven't seen her respond to voices in her head. I guess she's not schizophrenic, but she's paranoid. and delusional, so she is? Anyways, it completely breaks my suspension of disbelief that these guys would willingly help Eggman's evil robot sidekicks with anything, instead of just trying to beat them up or have them dismantled for spare parts or reprogrammed to be on their side. Instead of treating them like robots, they treat them like people who they can't do anything fancy with without moral repercussions. Why would Knuckles ever throw them back to Eggman instead of not letting them get back to their ride? Tails asks Sonic if he's okay because he seemed out of it back there, actually lampshading his deranged behavior from earlier. That's good, it's a dose of reality for a change because Tails is worried about him, instead of it just being ignored because it was meant to be a joke. Sonic says that all he remembers is that things were getting slow and then nothing, and he says that subsonic speed doesn't compute for him. He's been turned into a parody of himself! Subsonic speed is always something he'd have to go through. Like, he'd have to go through it every time he goes to sleep. And every time he talks, since he doesn't talk at super speed. He's supposed to be more than just this. Amy looks irritable while Sonic is talking as if he isn't even aware of Knuckles' badass moment for the sake of forcing comedy again. That's dumb. Sadly, this isn't why Amy was irritable, as I was wondering if she was worried that Sonic was going to get Knuckles going again. Instead, apparently this is the point where Amy lost her hammer. And I guess the last page of the issue was put in the wrong part of the video for no reason. Either that, or the comic issue decided to intentionally put the last page of the issue on page 2 for the sake of a joke. Something that at first made me wonder if the issue is gonna have a backwards format, like one of the Archie issues, which would have sucked. This issue is by Ian Flynn, but it feels more like the writers of Colors wrote it, because there's so many instances where something stupid happens, or stupid dialogue happens, purely in a failed attempt at comedy. Stuff happens or is said that would logically never happen. Okay, so Knuckles punches Sonic and not Amy, the one that spurred him to betray them all in the first place. I guess because of the double standard guys don't hit girls, where people would just accuse the comic of being sexist purely because Amy got slapstick for once in a blue moon. At least she got taken down a peg in some way because she kept looking scared of Knuckles, but logically she should have gotten some slapstick too. Not just Knuckles standing there and ranting her while Sonic gets the first hit, despite doing nothing to deserve it. Even Sally got some slapstick at some point. Knuckles captures all of the heroes, and then out of complete nowhere, instead of him doing this to spite Amy out of pure revenge like was actually foreshadowed, instead turns out that's more complicated than that. He wants to be a double agent against Eggman and make him think he's working for them so he can catch him by surprise, even though this Eggman doesn't have any plans more complicated than build Robot Rebecca. So all the heroes would need to do is smash stuff to stop him. And if Knuckles tried to be useful by overhearing his plans and warning the heroes, well, who cares? They'd learn his plans anyways and stop them in time regardless. This isn't the kind of Eggman where double agent would be useful against them. But yeah, Knuckles just wanted to prove to Amy that he could make a clever plan. But because he couldn't even do that right, he actually breaks down in tears, which was a genuinely sad moment. I'm impressed. I haven't found a Sonic comic moment to be a genuine tearjerker like this since Mellow's funeral in Archie. This kind of moment would have been much more impactful if, well, one, this wasn't just the second issue of the comic. Because so far we barely saw any of Amy's abuse of him. It was just a one-issue compressed vice. And we just have to assume she's been insulting him for years and he finally snapped from it. It had more impact with a lot more build-up, like several games' worth. It's only Amy who's shown to constantly insult him, not anyone else in this group, which is completely unlike the other continuities. So it only really applies to this one. It's so weird how with Sonic Boom, it's Amy who has the rivalry with Knuckles, while Sonic isn't like that to him at all, and Knuckles' competitiveness with Sonic is just one-sided. This kind of breakdown on Knuckles' part feels like something the games, or probably the reboot, have been building up to since they started, because all of his friends treat him like an idiot. They don't have to be written to point out he's an idiot, because all that does is explain the joke when the joke wasn't remotely clever in the first place. It doesn't take any sort of talent to write a character to say or act in a completely unbelievable and unrealistic way, which is usually the definition of bad writing, not a joke. But the writer seems so proud of his own jokes. Having the characters dryly mention the existence of logos is not funny. It's lazy. It's like, It's almost as if he was genuinely forced to be more comedic than he was comfortable with, and that's why the comedy is so stilted. That's why it doesn't work with the story and dialogue, because there was no room for it to fit to begin with. I mean, Other M wasn't exactly comedic. Anyways, my big problem with this is how rushed it was. Knuckles gets fed up with Amy in issue 1, not in the middle of the comic, and betrays the heroes in the very next issue without any build-up or plot where he's not around the heroes and they're wondering where he is. It just immediately cuts to him betraying them. There's so many times when Flynn disappoints me when I heard about a plot that he was going to do ahead of time, and I naturally assumed that he was going to do it a lot better than he did. And then after Amy barely puts any effort into it, when all she has to do is say that he captured them, when of course he did, right away Knuckles regrets what he did and turns around. This could have been a good chance to show us a villain moment for Eggman where he was terrorizing the villagers, a chance to remind us why we shouldn't root for this guy, and why we should see the heroes as the big heroes of the island. Why Eggman's staying on this island instead of leaving to go where the heroes can't foil his plans is beyond me. But anyways, Knuckles doesn't witness what Eggman's doing and go try to stop it himself and realize he can't and come back. Instead, after a giant amount of padding, eventually he goes to try to stop it himself anyways, but without having witnessed Eggman being evil to people before that, which would have been a great wake-up call to re-establish why he'd never want to work for Eggman, to properly explain why he'd be loyal to the heroes, because they can help fight Eggman, and they're not evil like him. Instead of reaffirming his morality that way, instead he almost immediately falls to his knees feeling terrible after just one scene of revenge against Amy. When we were given no heartwarming friendship moments between him and his friends before this point to establish why he'd be so loyal to them, attached to them to the point of having a reaction like this. Fleetway Knuckles fell to his knees when he was full of despair because he failed his duty. He was so upset that he told his friends to leave him on the island to die because he'd rather sink into the ocean with it as a punishment to himself. And that's not the first time he wanted to sink into the ocean with it either. This Knuckles isn't going the suicidal route, but he's still acting like he failed in his main duty. Without being the guardian of an emerald, this Knuckles considers his friends to be the only thing that really matter in his life. He values them more because of that, while most Knuckles just consider their friends to be distractions. This version of Knuckles is too much of a softie at heart to betray his friends for that long. Apparently. As established just now. I feel like a plot point this significant sounding should be significant, not done in just the first issue to make an impression, and then the rest of it isn't nearly as awesome and interesting. It was made a big deal of for a reason. It's the part of the comic that's the most memorable. And it's just a 2-issue story arc. Why is Knuckles so attached to people who aren't even that close to him? We've never even seen them hugging before. He doesn't mention the fact that he's upset because he knows Eggman's evil and they're good. He just seems to be upset because he betrayed them. When aside from Tails teaching him stuff, these friends of his are just people who happen to spend time with him every day. I like that Styx with a Chekhov's gun being useful for a change because she brought her own cage that she could escape from later. But how did she even think to bring a cage in the first place without knowing that any cages would show up? She's not a psychic. Insanity, I guess. Her entire motivation, her entire reason for having the crazy dialogue and nonsensical behavior that she has, is just a lazy excuse of insanity. Such a vague term. What's bothering her exactly? I know she's paranoid, but what a coincidence it is that her paranoia about all sorts of different things happened to lead her to this because she had the right assumption. You'd think that Styx, being the paranoid nut character, would have figured out Knuckles was going to betray them long before anyone else did and promptly be ignored because of her reputation. So that could be more foreshadowing. Also, with her being so paranoid, I legitimately have to question why her friends don't make her take pills to help with that, but the answer would be that she would just refuse to take the pills, I guess. And if they bothered addressing that, then that would be too dark and edgy and depressing. There was weird characterization a lot in this story. Amy was unsympathetic, getting barely any comeuppance or redemption, and Sonic was turned into a parody of himself who's literally nothing but a speed junkie with no substance at all just because he was forced to stay still for a little while. How does he sleep then? At first it made sense because he was trapped in a tiny cage, but after he was freed, it was like he regressed by 10 years and he only cared about speed after that. Not even reacting to anything that Knuckles was doing like an actual person would. Isn't he supposed to be the main character? The reason Sonic's a great character to the point where I never felt like he was overexposed and got tired of him is because he has a surprising amount of substance to him beneath the surface of hip, cool hero. He can be kind of profound at times. Like in Black Knight, where he's telling Merlina that because everything has an end, that's all the more reason to live life to the fullest instead of not caring. He's not just about gotta go fast, impatience, and simple-minded, I'm a game character, and game characters go fight bad guys the way they always do in bad guy fighting game, right? He's also a compassionate, clever, and carefree and cocky person who's not even that cocky, because it's just an act he plays up to look confident around his enemies and relieve stress. It's all about the C's for his personality, which is another clever thing. It's surprisingly layered. Sonic feels like he's barely a person at all in this comic so far. He barely feels like he has a personality. He barely has any presence compared to all of his other friends. He's just kind of there. But anything's better than Boom Sonic from the TV show, who just naps and grumbles miserably all the time, instead of excitedly looking forward to thrills and danger. I'd rather a bland and bare-bones Sonic than that unlikable betrayal of its character, who's all about going the opposite of fast, and more like lying still. Who spends that much time sleeping during the day, besides babies and old people? The bottom line is, Knuckles' betrayal arc was done and wrapped up way too quickly. Knuckles had a genuine sad and sympathetic moment, and he was badass destroying Mecha by himself. The plot itself was pretty basic in what happens. It's the dialogue of the characters that fills the story out.